This week I'm in Wellington. It's the capital city of New Zealand. Now, I've come here to meet a woman who's led a life like no other. It's a controversial, sometimes painful and confronting story, but it's also a life that's been led with an enormous amount of courage. Georgina Beyer was the first transsexual in the world to be elected as a Member of Parliament. She began life rather more plainly as just George, a boy who was, to grow up, to be a woman. Before her sex change operation, her life was often pure misery.
I have now transferred that into wanting to share the story simply because it helps inform others around the world of the art of the possible, actually, and of self-respect, and that we have potential and we should be allowed to reach it.
This is the Wairarapa region, about 2 hours' drive over the mountains from Wellington. It's full of quaint, almost picture-book small country towns. This is the area which formed Georgina's constituency as an MP. We met in the Martinborough town centre. It looks like sort of the typical New Zealand setting. I mean, it's beautiful, it's well, this is the...
Got its pub.
It's got its pub. I mean, there are 3 cars have gone by while we've been filming, which is the most since we got here.
Good luck.
Yeah. It's a very, very tranquil place. That's the stereotype. But you're growing up. Was that a tranquil thing? Because I can't believe that it would have been for you when you were young.
Well, when I was very young, of course it was. I had a good upbringing and I had a bit of a rural background there, and the first 5 years of my life I spent essentially on my grandparents' farm. And then my mother remarried and we relocated to Wellington, and I was 5 years of age then, and I started primary school then. All of that part of my life was fine, but I must admit my transgender tendencies started to display themselves when I was that age.
Really? As early as that?
Yes, but only seen as by the adults as child's play, really, and nothing to be too particularly worried about, dressing up, that kind of thing, and perhaps a little more effeminate than other boys, but otherwise no particular problems until I was about 7 or 8 and 9, and then of course conditioning to be the man I should be or the boy I should be had sort of more of the feminine influences diminished in my life.
So you were pressured? I mean, because this is a...
I wouldn't have known it was pressure at the time. It's just that I was sort of guided into different activities, from playing with my little girlfriend down the road, Joy McEldowney, and playing dress-ups in her dress-up box and dress-up clothes. They thought, well, perhaps my 5 uncles could take me out hunting instead. Yeah, that kind of conditioning. When I did get older, of course, and I would do dressing up still, and then I started to get punished for the behaviour, and I soon learnt to be deceptive about that behaviour. Don't ask me what the compulsion was to dress up and be a girl all the time, but it was always there, and I did it. I wanted to, I needed to, I had to be a woman.
This may sound a strange question in a way, but did that make you intensely unhappy or just confused? I mean, what's going through your...
Confused, unhappy in the sense that as I learnt that it was a bad thing, socially it was a bad and unacceptable thing that was happening to me, that the suppression of it, the burying it, the trying to comply with society's demands of what you must be as a man, I suppressed it all and tried to be the boy, the young man, the teenager that everyone expected me to be as a male, and that hurt. That was, I think, quite psychologically damaging. But I found theatre...
I can hear that in your voice, actually. There's almost sort of an anger there still.
Yes, yes, there is.
To talk more about some of the darkest moments of her life, she suggested we go somewhere even quieter.
It's beautiful. This is the Ruamahanga River, and this part of it is in the Carterton district, of course, a district I was the mayor of. And,
right, so this is very much your territory.
Very much part of my territory. It's fed by 2 other major rivers at least, the Waihini and the Waingawa and the Tauhera Nikau further down. And it actually cuts across cuts across right through the 3 district council areas.
It's almost impossible to believe in these surroundings that her life has often been so turbulent and violent. Before undergoing her sex change surgery, she worked as a prostitute in Australia.
The sex industry was something I did not embrace and wanted to get into and saw that as a career path. It was one of the only options left for making a crust. If I couldn't get money from welfare, if I couldn't get a legitimate job because I was a transgender person, absolute outright prejudice and discrimination, no question about it. What was a girl to do? And it was sort of an area, the sex industry, where the likes of us sort of would be, and even then we were at the bottom of the pecking order.
I mean, I suppose it goes without saying, it was a very hard, I mean, there were a lot of traumatic incidents.
Oh, of course, look, the violence, the drugs, the degradation. I mean, I hated prostitution from the first client I ever had to the last one I ever had. But I had to do it to survive. And in order to be able to cope with it, I fell into the cultural aspect of living in that twilight world very easy. It took up a chunk of, 5 to 7 years of my life. What a waste of time. I had much more human potential than that. But barriers were in front of me and many others like me from getting on as per normal.
As you said, it was very violent. I mean, you were assaulted. I mean, was there a big turning point there?
Oh, of course there was. I mean, there were times I wanted to commit suicide and indeed tried to. I was pack raped in Sydney in 1979, and after I recovered from that, which also drove me towards suicide because I felt like the scum of the earth, the way I'd just been treated. And not only that, felt worthless enough not to want to go and seek any justice for it. Just accepted that, well, I'm just a drag queen sex worker. Who the hell's going to take me seriously? What an awful thing to feel. Well, I got angry about the injustice of that after I'd recovered many months later and, quite a bit down the track, and decided that I was going to prove that I was very much a worthy person and pursue my endeavours in the showbiz world, really, film and television, and a few opportunities came along.
So from that you decided, right, I'm going to start a new life, new direction.
I just got angry about people trying to deny me my right to live like everyone else because of their prejudice about my sexuality.
This is the New Zealand Parliament in Wellington, known affectionately as the Beehive. A transsexual, former sex worker, wasn't exactly the most likely candidate for election. But it says much about both Georgina and the electors that they voted for her first as their local mayor and then as their MP. More remarkable still, as this is a rural, traditionally fairly conservative part of the country.
I didn't hide anything about me. Everything to be known about me was put out there. I did that purposely to make sure that they understood the individual that they were going to consider to elect a public office. So for me, I could leave all of that rubbish behind, and for them, they did too. They thought, right, let's look at her ability.
Which is a great thing, and I'm full of admiration, but that's a very traumatic process, both for you and, I'm guessing, for voters.
I learnt on the hoof, I guess, how to be a politician because I knew nothing about it. And there's many elements of it I dislike immensely.
How did some people, though, react? There must have been, or was there not? There must have been reserve.
I had a huge amount of support. I never lost an election except the first one I ever ran in, and every election I stood in from there on, they increased my majority. So that alone should tell you that they were confident with my ability to do the job. That it came with the added bonus that I suddenly became a little bit of a media star because of the curiosity factor about me being the first transsexual in the world to do this. But I also think it's a remarkable reflection on people that, regardless of the label of conservative, they were broad-minded enough, maybe even more broad-minded than those who might live in Greenwich Village or downtown Big Apple or wherever, not to be so discriminating. They looked for the basic and simple truth about a person, and I guess I seem to fill that for them.
In a way, that's not a surprise, because I think it's perhaps not well known internationally, but New Zealand has a bit of a history for being first. I mean, women's suffrage, as I understand it, this is the first place.
first place where women had
suffrage,
votes.
the first country in the world to give women the vote.
After the break, more from the Wairarapa region of New Zealand and the woman who has been its most extraordinary MP.